So yeah, thank you very much for coming. We understand you're all busy people and there's always farm work to be doing. So today's webinar is on crop scouting and keeping your crop records all together. So essentially using fieldmargin as a digital notepad for all your observations. So a bit of the run of the play, how the day is going to go. Oh, not the day, I'm not going to keep you here for a day. So yeah, so a little bit of a run of the play. So we're going to start off, Camilla's going to give an introduction. Then we're going to do some live demos. So I'm going to show you on mobile how you can create notes and do the scouting information. Camilla's then going to show you field health, how you can do some scouting and field observations remotely. We're then going to have answer any questions you have, but we'll have a little bit of a chat about what we're developing at the moment, what's coming next. We've then got a video, some short video of some user examples that some people have sent in. So we'll show you that, and then more questions. If that's we're here to answer anything you've got to ask about the program. So over to Camilla.
All right, so to kick things off, I thought it might be helpful just to give a little bit of a history of fieldmargin. Apologies if this is repeating for some of you, but I think it's always interesting to know. So fieldmargin was founded about 7 years ago by our founder, Mark, who actually has the perfect combination of skills of being both a farmer and a software developer. He'd been working in software development in London and then started the transition of taking over his family farming business in England. And as he started working on the farm more, he became really frustrated with the software that he was working with. He found it was slow, clunky, particularly because he was still working between London and the farm. He'd often want to know information about what was going on the farm, and his sister, who was on the farm, would need to go to the farm office to look up information for him. And so he thought, I know how to build software, I could build something better. And that was really the very beginning of fieldmargin. It started off as something just designed for Mark to use on his farm. And then over time, he mentioned it to a few farming friends, and they said, this sounds interesting. This is something that we might like to use. And so he decided to make fieldmargin into a commercial business, brought on his business partner and co-founder, Rob, who's our CEO today, to build up the fieldmargin product. They went out to speak to lots of farmers and sat in lots of farm office meetings to understand how could they build the most useful piece of farm software possible. And there were two things that they noticed. The first was that in a lot of those farm meetings, people would be sitting around and there'd be a map at the center of the table. So it might be coloring in different fields for planning crop rotations, or it might be drawing or pointing to bits of the map to say, this is where there's problems, this is where we need to investigate something. And the other frustration that they saw was that often there'd be things scribbled down on bits of paper and then having to be typed up in the office. And so that was why they decided that when fieldmargin started, it needed to be something that was really centered around the map and mapping based, and also that it needed to be mobile first and something that worked in the field, even when you don't have internet connection, and that you could use for collaborating with your whole team. And it's really been built up from there. So I've been with the company just over 6 years now, looking after products. So our whole way of working is talking to farmers and our users, understanding what you guys like, what do you not, and that's really the core for deciding what should we build next. And so over time, we've built up from quite a simple mapping and note-taking app to add in field records, input records, yield recording, reporting, livestock management, connecting with other data from things like satellite imagery and drones, with the goal that fieldmargin becomes a place where you can keep track of everything that's happening on your farm, whether that's data that you record directly or things that you're recording with other technologies, so that you have one platform that's a hub of all of your farming information. So hopefully that's useful for you as background. Where we are today is we've got farmers all over the world, which is really interesting for us to talk to you guys and learn about all of your different farming operations. So I think we've got farms in over 70 countries now, and about 15,000 farmers using us each month. And I'll hand back to Ali.
Right, so I'm going to start off as to showing you how to make the note. As Camilla said in the introduction, a lot of farming is about location, and a lot of the farm meetings, you might sit around in a farm meeting and say, oh, there's this issue here, you try and explain it, or you've got kind of bits in the information, bits of everything on pieces of paper. But what we're able to do now is use the mobile app to keep the records here. So I'm just going to share my screen. Yeah, so can everyone see the mobile screen? Cool. So first off, how to make a note. If you tap the note button bottom right, that's how you start. So first you have to give a title. This is something that you'd be able to see, you'd be able to find on a search list. So for example, I could do weed scouting. So next you have a description. So this can be something that you can add to start the conversation. So for example, do you know what this is? And you can also add a photograph here. So if I go add photograph, pick a file, I can go down and see, I'll add this one. And then you've got the idea to add a location. So if I tab point, so I'm adding this note remotely, but if you're actually on farm, your location would be shown as a blue dot. So you can put the scouting pin relative to where you are. So tap the map and tap save. So after you've done that, you've got the option to tag people. So this is really useful if, say, if there's a weed and you don't, so if somebody who's more specialised in that area, you can tag them, then they'll get a notification. You can invite people via WhatsApp, so you can send invites across to everyone. So then you can tap save. The note will then be visible on the map. You've got the comment section, kind of that you can keep active here, and you've got the information and all the data there as well. So notes that you mark as pins will be shown on the map as pins here. So if you tap one, you can then view details of it and share with everyone. So for example, we map this one here. You've got example of hedges to be cut. And you've got the areas marked out in different sections. You can also add notes. You can view the notes in the field history. So if you tap a note and it's attached to a field, that would be there. The notes are also listed in the activity list. So these are in order of when they were added, when they were last kind of created. But you can change this on the filter. You can change it to be created date or last edited date. You can also search based on people's names as well. So one thing I could do is I can type in there and I can search for particular jobs. So, for example, I've got one here, fence broken. I then have that kind of details there, and any new messages are highlighted. So you can zoom in and out of the map as such, like here. Also, something that's useful to know is the map visibility. So if you tap the white button with the cross there, then the bottom option is to edit map visibility. So here you can turn the visibility of notes off and on again. You can also select to view different tasks and turn the field names off as well. That's something I'm often telling new users. So these comments can really also, the comment section is something that I talk to our most established users really utilize the comment section in the same way that like a WhatsApp chain or an email chain, you can use this comment section to build up data over the season. So in this example, I've got crop monitoring of green area index. So for example, if I'm doing my fertilizer management plan, and part of that is monitoring the canopy throughout the season. You know, if I add those photographs when I have my advisor over, you've got the data already there and attached to the field. Yeah, attached to the field. So a few more details here. So when you have a note, you can add a to-do to it. So a good example for this is the fence broken. So we've got the fence broken. We're going to come look at it tomorrow. What you can do is mark it as a to-do. And then when you've done that, you can add a due date. So for example, by the weekend and a time. Comments, you could be, make this a priority. Animals in next week. So kind of keep the chat open that way. Once it's been given a to-do, it will become part of a to-do list as well. So the other thing I mentioned previously is kind of tracking crops across the field. So I had that oilseed rape comment here. So what you can actually do is, as well as giving it a point, you can also attach it to a field. So if we, you can do this by selecting on the list, or if you go choose to the map. So this is useful because when it's attached to the field, it becomes part of the field history. So when I tap on the field and to history, you'll see that crop monitoring note. So it's easy for everyone to access, and essentially a filing system. You can also attach the notes to livestock. So we've got some herds set up here. And then you can add note. So for example, if there's a vaccination or there's something that needs to be sorted within the herd, you can attach the note and tap save. Again, that would make the note would become part of the herd history. Something else that's useful, they're actually quite, there's a simple thing notes, but they're actually quite versatile in the different things that you can use. So if I go to activity, filter, and search for soil sampling points. So you can use these for kind of setting up soil samples, setting the locations. And then when you get the results back in, you can attach kind of a photograph here showing what the data is. So that means you can access it in the field. And you can also upload files. So here I've uploaded a file that shows different methods for sampling soil. So instead of having it as an email or having it in the office, you can have that accessed in the field. You know, it's always useful to have your soil triangle sampling data when you actually need it. Like I said, we're doing this remotely, but if I was actually in the farm, my location will be shown as a blue dot. And something you can do is use this for weed monitoring. So I've set one up here, for example. So if you've got a patch of weed or a waterlogged area or anything that's kind of, you need to know the measurement area, perhaps you need to do some reseeding, or you need to know what area not to seed, or environmental stewardship. As you create the note, you've got the option when you've got an area, you top here, you can draw by walking or driving. So it's dependent on the GPS on your phone for how accurate it's going to be. But we've had some people that had really good successes when I've been using it out in the field. It's been pretty good. It's done the job. A couple bit more bits here. So something else you can do. So say I've got a field of beans here. So if I'm doing some, for example, disease monitoring, I think I've got some photos here. You've got some. So when I draw the location, I can select points, and as I'm field walking, I can mark out areas that I know are down that I see as I go along. So, for example, if you just need to, when your agronomist comes, you know the areas that you want to go and have a look at. And we've got people who've used this method for rocks in Australia. So they've got a large field, you need to clear away some rocks, they mark each one by one. So when they actually do the clearing out, it's quicker. Also, after some storms, people were marking out tree damage, trees that had fallen over. Again, so you save a lot of time when you're actually in the machine going to clear them up. These points, they're saved as points on the map, so visible. But when you're using web, you can actually get the GPS coordinates. So that can be useful if you're using any GIS software or you've got other things there. And also, you can export it all out to Excel. So if you need it for sharing in an Excel format, that's possible too. That's just about covered anything. I hope I haven't forgotten everything. But it's this really keeping your digital farm notepad, getting the records there.
Okay, any questions so far? Or shall I carry on? All good? Carry on?
Yeah.
Super. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is how you can use field health to save time when you're out scouting in the field, and also to identify areas where you need to go and investigate problems. So just give me a second to find the right farm, and then I will share my screen. Okay, so can everyone see my screen now? Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. So this is actually a section of my family farm at home. And the way that field health works is it uses satellite imagery from Sentinel-2, and then it does something called NDVI analysis, which stands for Normalized Differentiation Vegetation Index. Mm-hmm. You're always going to make sure you can get your tongue around that one, to show the variation in green plant matter within a field. So the way that you get to that is when you're on the web app, and this also works on mobile, you go to the map section, and then you'll see this calendar, and every date where you can see a green or a red dot are dates where there is NDVI imagery available. Normally, it will be available about one new image per week. It may vary slightly depending on weather, because if it's very cloudy, as it often is at this time of the year in the UK, unfortunately, then the satellite can't see, and so we don't have new imagery. So what does that look like? If I click on one of these, if I click on this one from earlier in March, then you can see you've got this scale from red, which is areas where there's very low amounts of plant vegetation, through orange and yellow where there's some vegetation, and then green are areas where there's a large amount of plant vegetation. So actually at the moment, most of our farm is pretty orange because we're all in spring cropping. So we're just finishing having all of these fields, having the cover crops grazed off by sheep, and we'll be planting new crops in them as soon as it dries out and we can get out onto the fields. So if we go through to some dates from last year, we'll be able to see a little bit more how this looks in season. So if I choose a date from June, this gives you a much clearer picture of how this would look in season. So you can see that you've got these green areas where there's high levels of plant matter, and then the yellow and orange where the crops are doing less well. And you can also swap this over to RGB, so just plain color, if you want to confirm what you're seeing. So the main way that I like to use this is for identifying areas where there might be a problem, or where there's something that needs to be investigated. So for example, in this field, you can see a lot of the crop is doing well, but then there's this area here which is doing less well. I actually know that this is because that field is on a bit of a slope, and so you tend to have the moisture run off the top of that slope and take away the nutrients, so that part of the field often doesn't do as well. But if you weren't sure why that was, you could go and make a new note and put something like not doing well, what's going on, and then you could add a location there. And then either when you're out scouting, or if you had your agronomist coming in, they'd know this is a place where you want to have an investigate and see what's happening. You can also view this on your mobile phone. So if you're already out in the field, you could also pull this up and see where are the areas that I might want to look at. Another good example from this cropping is last season we had turnips in these two fields, and turnips are vulnerable to a lot of the same crops as oilseed rape or canola. So this area that is red was an area where we had massive amounts of cabbage stem flea beetle damage that almost completely wiped out that crop. So that's something that's clearly visible from space, but also you could then go out and investigate that. So this is some drone photography of that of that area. So you can clearly see the distinction between the yellow of the turnips, which are in flower, and that's why that imagery actually looks slightly orange, because as the plant goes from being in full leaf to flower and senescing, then it will go from being bright green on your imagery to orange, and then actually through to red when it's senesced and is ready for harvest. So we can see that big patch at the top of the field there corresponds with that patch of red on the imagery. And the other thing that this is really helpful for is, Ali already said how you can walk around an area in the field if you see a problem to measure it out. But if you don't have time, or when it's a larger area, something that this is very useful for is for measuring out problem areas. So again, I can go into note and I could write something like flea beetle damage. And then I can use the drawing tool, draw an area to draw around that area. So then you can see how much of the field was affected by that pest damage, and use that for either a targeted treatment just for areas where you have a problem, or for future treatments and investigation. So if you were doing a cost-benefit analysis of, should I have done a spray in this field, or I think we did spray in this field, but sometimes you just can't win, then that would be a way to do a cost benefit of what was the loss because of damage and what treatment might I want to do in future. Or conversely, this is something where if you're wanting to do soil test investigations, like Ali said, then you could mark out areas that are having problems that you might want to specifically test to see if there is a nutrient deficiency that's causing problems in those areas. Okay. So the next thing that I was going to talk about is monitoring sites. So monitoring sites are a way that you can record numerical data from the same place over multiple times during the year. So a common way that lots of fieldmargin uses for is for their rainfall monitoring and weather monitoring. So the way that you get to these is from the data tab over here, and also the data section on the mobile app. And you can see this is the sort of thing that you can use them for. So we've got things like a rain gauge, and then you can see measurements for rainfall over time. And we've also got grain sampling, so you might want to use this in your storage facilities when you're checking your moisture and temperature. Pasture measurement, if you do plate meter readings, you can use it for soil measurements, and insect counts, which is the example I'm going to show you how to set up now. So something that you might want to do for your crop monitoring is you might have some pitfall traps set up or some sticky traps so that you can monitor levels of pest pressure and then treat once you get to a threshold level of pests. So an example of that would be slug traps. So if you wanted to set up a monitoring site for your slug trap, then what you would do is you would go to add a monitoring site and call it slug trap, and then you choose the location for your monitoring site. So where is that trap? So just pop it there, and then say what you're recording. So for us, this would be slugs. And then you can choose what type of data you're recording. So in this case, it would be a number, and you can add multiple metrics. So let's say that as well as knowing how many slugs, you also wanted to know how many snails have fallen into your pitfall trap. Then you could add a separate item for snails. Say that that's also a number and add that. And then you can create that monitoring site, and then you're ready to start adding your readings. So then either when you're out in the field, or if you didn't get time when you get back, you can go in and add a reading, and it's automatically got the date and time. You can change that if you need to. You just click on that, and then you can change to a different date. And we can say, let's say on this occasion, we've got 4 slugs and no snails, which is quite a lot. So we might want to think about working on that. And then for a monitoring site that you've been using for longer, so for example, with this insect count in our grain store, you can see that there's been lots of data recorded over time. You don't always have to fill in data for every metric. So if there was one day where you've got these 3 traps and you forgot to check the second trap, then you could leave out that one. And you can see that both as a timeline, and you can also go in and view it as a graph, and you can change between the last week, the last month, and see overall time. So you can see what the trend is, and then you can change between your different metrics over here. So it looks like trap 2 is getting better, but trap 1 is really on a worrying trajectory. And the other thing that you can do with this information is you can export it as a CSV or an Excel file. So then you can open it up in Excel and do whatever additional analysis that you would like to with it. And I think that's everything on monitoring sites. So I will hand back to Ali.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully a lot of you, well, I know some of you here definitely use fieldmargin for your crop records. So for the records you need for any audits, that's, for example, what sprays you've got, what you've planted. So I'm going to give you a short introduction for using that here. We're going to do another webinar for in particular for audits, but I'm going to show you some starting points for field jobs. Essentially, I thought we'd start at planting. So to create a planting field job, you can go up here, field job and planting. You can then attach the fields. So we've tried to keep it very kind of map based. So you can either select on the map or on the list, but get them marked out what you need to and click add. You can add the inputs, which in this case is your seed. So these are seeds that I've already got set up on this farm. But for example, I think this is oats. So I'd set up an oat seed, and you can either apply, if you know the total amount you're applying, you can write that in. Or if you know the amount, probably more likely, you know the amount that you want per hectare, you can type that in and calculate the total amount you need. So once this has been done, it becomes part of the to-do list, and you can tag other people in it. In a similar way to notes, you can also use the comment section to keep any records that you have about this planting job. So for example, if you're trying a new variety, you could include some of the variety details. The other thing that's useful when you do set up a planting job, if you're applying any kind of seed coats or any kind of seed treatments, you can add this data as an input alongside the planting job as well. So once you've set up a planting job, when you tap a field, you'll see that it's become part of the to-do list. And actually, if you go to reports, the seed that input will be saved. So you already know at the planning stage, because I'm looking at next season now, how much seed you're going to need for that field. There's also some other handy bits. So when you open the job here, you've got more, and you can actually sort out a spray print sheet. So if you have, for instance, a contractor in that you don't want to be part of your fieldmargin farm, you can print that out to provide them, or send or even email it to them. So as you mark a job as complete, you've got this option to save a completed day and add weather details too. So that's handy for the audits and handy for your own personal farming records too. So I've kind of shown you the basics of setting the planting job here, but you've also got some reports that are really useful for this planning into next season. So when you go to the reporting tab, you've got a usage report pie chart here. So this will kind of show you what you're growing and the different percentage and hectareage areas. I've seen a lot of farms that grow an amazingly wide variety of cropping, and you can actually add some of your environmental stewardship on here. So it's an idea of what your land use will be for that season. You've also got this input summary, but that's really, really useful for ordering. So if I tap here, I can see from the planting jobs I've set up the amount of seed that I need for each of these varieties, roughly. I can also add a unit cost. So if I know at the minute what the seed's selling for, I can add that there and do some budgeting as well. This can all be downloaded. So I could even just send that off to as a list of supplies that I need from my provider. Really easy to share. So you could, if you work very closely with agronomist, you can both be on the same page here. We have all these other reports, and I'm looking forward to showing you more of these another day. But just in case you don't know, with field jobs, other field jobs we have useful for arable in particular is, or not arable in particular, but crop monitoring. And when you've got spraying, so if I touch a barley field, we've got add inputs. Sorry. We're connected to a pesticide database, so that means we've got a list of products there for you. And when you select one, such as this fungicide, you get the registration number, the unit, and you can use this to calculate the sprays that you need. We've also got yield reporting and nutrient content monitoring. Is there anything else to add there, or do you think that's good for now?
No, I think that's great. How are you guys getting on? Any questions?
Good. Right, we're going to need you to do a check now, because we're going to play a video of some users that have done clips here.
Hi, my name is Olesa. We run an agricultural farm in the west of Ukraine. We are involved in cultivation of spring and winter wheat, oilseed rape, corn, soybeans, winter barley, and buckwheat. Buckwheat turned out to be the most profitable crop in our farm. Here behind me there is a field of 80 hectares of oilseed rape. Our oilseed rape has passed the winter very well. In autumn time, after harvesting wheat, we glyphosated the field, applied chicken manure 4 tons per hectare, and it's now in very good condition. So, also we managed to apply all mineral fertilizers in springtime. Field margin application is a very excellent device for keeping records for other mineral fertilizers. It counts nutrients precisely. We hope, unfortunately the season is rather dry, and we hope our oilseed rape will provide good yield.
This video shows farm scouting using a microscope. It has been sent in from field margin user Mike Jackson's macadamia orchards in South Africa. It shows the parasitoid wasps in action. The wasps parasite the eggs of stinkbug and macadamia nut borer that ravage crops each year. Simply put, the wasp's larvae develop inside the stinkbug eggs and emerge as adults to repeat the cycle. Over the past couple of years, Mike has built up a healthy population of parasitoid wasps in his orchard, but providing a consistent supply of nectar-producing plants that sustain a vibrant population of parasitoids and significantly reduce the need to use pesticides. Mike tracks the numbers and locations of insects using notes to compare weekly trends to thresholds to determine when it is viable to intervene with biological control measures. This has significantly reduced his need to use pesticides. In 2023, he only sprayed once with a natural fungi. This cost 30,000 rand. This was a lot less than the 200,000 rand budget for the program sprays.
Hi there, it's Camilla here, Head of Product at Field Margin, and today I'm out on my family's farm in Kent in southeast England to talk to you a little bit about using Field Margin for recording information when crop walking. It's not an ideal time of year to be showing you this on our farm because we're mostly in spring cropping, and so we've just been finishing off grazing off some cover crops. So this field that I'm standing in has been rape and turnips and then grazed off with sheep, and it's going to be drilled with spring barley in a few weeks once it finally dries out and warms up. But one thing that I can show you is how to mark out waterlogging in your field. So you can probably see over my shoulder a nice puddle here where the water's not drained away. So I'm going to show you how you could record that using Field Margin.
So what you tap here, add the note, and here I'm adding the title waterlogging. Then you can, as you do it, you can attach the photo, while you're there, of the details. You can easily share with everyone on your team what's going on. Next, we need to add a location, so we tap the point button. And then you can see your location is the blue dot. So I tap the pin where I'm standing and then tap save. Here you can add a description or tag anyone else that you need to, and then tap save. And there you go.
So basically, I think most of the time when we have to analyze a farm, we map the farm before we even go there. For instance, especially when I was at Sadnek, I would map the farm before I go there, and then I would, from there on, with the data I have mapped, looking at what does it correspond with what I'm seeing on the farm. So yeah, so that's how I basically was trying to use the tool. See for myself, this is what I'm seeing from a satellite image. Is this exactly how it is on the farm? At first, our biggest obstacle that we had here in South Africa with farmers was just having reception, having network to connect to was one of the biggest problems. Now there's a bit more infrastructure that has been built up in rural areas where they now have access to reception. And now since that one is starting to get sorted, now farmers are starting to see all of this stuff on the internet and stuff where they can use technology as part of their daily operations, and how it can drastically improve their revenues in all aspects of their farming.
So here is a field health image example from a UK agronomist, Kieran Walsh. He's used field health imagery to track the spread of pests. For example, this image shows the damage cabbage stem flea beetle has done to oilseed rape crops. The image on the left-hand side is a field in January, so here you can see lots of growth. But in a matter of weeks, you can see it's turned into large areas of orange and yellow where the plants have died off. In his words, the imagery doesn't stop the flea beetle issue, but it does show the impact of the problem and help map out and measure the areas that you may re-drill with a different crop. When ground truthing the image, what I've mapped out, it's been very accurate. So here's another example of using satellite imagery to reduce water use and improve crop performance in Arizona. This is by a user called Jacko Thoron. So what he's found is that using the NDVI imagery, he's found that some fields he thought were dry were actually turned out to be too wet, and he was able to reduce the irrigation. So that increased the growth and saved time. He also used the imagery to monitor his harvest from the office. So on each image, he can clearly see which alfalfa fields have been cut. And when he manages 7,000 hectares, it's really useful to monitor the progress of the harvest remotely. A different user, Gabriel, also used the imagery to monitor flooding in Argentina. So he farms over 6,000 hectares, and using the weekly NDVI imagery, he can spot the damage as it happens. So in this imagery, you can see that there was very heavy rainfall. So they had more than 200 millimeters rainfall in 35 hours. So using the NDVI imagery, he could clearly see the damage the water's caused and calculate the affected area flooding. He could use this information to plan how to manage his land and make his farm more resilient to extreme weather in the future. For example, building a reservoir, which would meant that there'd be reduced crop damage and a collection of water.
That was interesting for you. Certainly nothing more embarrassing than watching yourself and hearing yourself on video. So that was fun for me.
I didn't put my one in. I should have done that. Wasn't fun.
No. Super. So I can see we've got a question from Stenio. Is that right? How do I add information to our historic data for years that are not on our farm years?
Yeah, so I think our farm years go back to 2018.
Yeah. Should I share the screen?
Yeah. Yeah, the farm years go back to 2017. So what I've advised people to do in the past is you can add jobs to 2017 with any date you like. If you can add, so say if you're adding yield, for example, you can add it. You can give it the completed date of whenever the job was completed, 2010, for example, and then that would be saved as part of your field history in 2010. What you won't have is the record of the map and the field use attached, but you can go. You won't have it separated, but essentially you could use the year 2017 as your kind of historic file. I sometimes think of field years as being a file of your different data, so you could do it that way. Does that make sense to you, Camilla?
That's exactly what I would have suggested.
Out of interest,
So there's that 2010 harvesting job that we just added on the field history.
Yeah. Do you know how far back you'd like to go? Is uploading historic data something that you would find useful? And we can. I'll always email to ask. That's something we have been working on as well, is to be able to upload yields across years. So say if you have an Excel spreadsheet that goes back to 2017 of yields and field, you can email me and we'll get those uploaded for you. It's not within the software yet, but it's something we're looking into. So another question: can you add irrigation blocks and different types of irrigation? I'm in California, so we irrigate. Also, can you details on a field, the row and tree types? Hi, Greg. Nice
Greg.
to see you. So irrigation blocks, you can. So we do have irrigating farm jobs. So with when you set up a field job, one of the options is irrigating. So that's useful if you've got people out on the ground and you want them to track what irrigating they're doing. There's also some people that have added it as inputs there on monitoring sites, so you can monitor quite precisely the amount of irrigation that you're doing. So yeah, if we got an irrigating job and you can add an input. So for example, so if you've got water, sometimes I know you could put different nutrients in as well, but you could maybe at the minute you could add the total litres of water you've used. A different way of doing it as well is kind of setting up the unit as hours, so you can monitor the number of hours you've had the irrigation on for each day. Have a certain input. Yeah, and you can set up the job as hours, an account, and I put that to other. And then if I know for each block the hours, it's also something that's useful to use comments for, if that's something you track that way. I know that there's quite a lot of people that get there's software that comes with the irrigation system. So if anyone uses any of those and they'd be interested, it might be something that we can integrate with in the future. Field or block can be separated into subfields as well. So that could be something that's useful. So what we got there.
Did that answer your question, Colleen, by the way? Super.
Yeah, and if you'd like, I'll send you a few more instructions over.
So Greg asked, did I miss how you upload maps without sitting trying to draw around a field? No, you didn't. We didn't do that in this session. But the way that you upload maps, I'll just show you quickly, is if you've already got your fields mapped out and you've got those saved on your computer as something like a shapefile or a KML file, then you can go to your fields and go to add and then click on import, and that will give you a few different options for adding your fields. So actually, if you use your other question was about GPS integrations. So if you use John Deere machinery and you've mapped out your fields using those, then we integrate directly with the John Deere Operations Center, so you can pull those field boundaries through. Otherwise, you can use the boundary uploader tool and select your files, add them into this box here and upload them, and those will then be processed and appear as fields on your farm. We're also in the process of rolling out a new tool called Auto Boundary. It's currently available in the UK, most of the USA, some of South Africa and Australia, and it will be coming to more of South Africa and more of Australia and also Canada in the coming months. And the way that that works is, again, you go to fields, you go to add a field, choose draw, and now, as well as the options that you'll be used to for manually drawing a shape, there's this option detect boundary. And then if you click on that, and then you just click on the center point of the field that you want to add, so let's say that one, then it's automatically detected from the satellite imagery the perimeter of that field. If you thought that it wasn't quite right, you could edit that boundary slightly, and then name your field, give it a usage if you want to. So let's say that was corn, save it, and yeah, I think we both find that pretty magic because it's so quick and easy.
It gets most of the vast majority of fields it gets first time. It's really good.
Did that answer your question, Greg?
Oh, we can't hear you. Yeah,
super.
Perfect.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or suggestions or feedback that anyone wanted to share?
We're working on at the minute to be able to attach notes to features. So I shared all the different ways you can use notes. So that's something that will come.
Yeah, so that's one thing that we've got in the pipeline. A couple of other bits that are in the pipeline that might be of interest and are relevant to crop monitoring. A big one that we've been working on for quite a long time is pesticide checking. So We showed in the demo how you can add a pesticide from the pesticide database for your job and how that pulls through the registration number and the active ingredients. And you'll also shortly be able to perform checks. So if you've set a rate of a pesticide, let's say 1 litre per hectare, then you'll be able to go check this pesticide and check based on the label information, is it permitted for use on that crop? Is it still registered or has it expired? And is the dose that I'm planning on applying it at permitted for that crop and for the amount that you've already put on for the season? So that's something that's coming up soon. And if you would like to test that or you'd like to know more, then just drop us a line and let us know. Another thing that's coming is field work areas. So you can already set, when you're making a field job, you can set the worked area for that particular field, but we're also adding in areas that apply across the year. So if you just want to say, right, my field's, let's say 10.5 hectares, and I want to actually only use 10 hectares of it, type in the number 10 and then use that as your area for all of your jobs going forward without having to remap the field. Greg, to your question about availability on other GPS devices, if you're able to get an export of a file from those GPS devices of something like a shapefile and a KML, then that should be able to import, no problem.
Yeah.
But if you drop us a message, then we can look into that a bit more for you. And we're always really interested to hear what other technologies you're using on your farm, whether that's the GPS, sensors, machinery, livestock equipment, because one of the things that we want to do going forward is get more technology connected so that you do have more of your farming data available in fieldmargin so that it's on hand and useful and easy for you to access. So if there's things you'd particularly like to see, please do let us know.
Yeah, AgriBuggy sounds fun.
Yeah,
it's a good
cool
name. It's a good name. Yeah.
No, not a strong recommendation on AgriBuggy. Wonderful.
No, thank you so much for coming, and you can definitely message us with any more questions that you have. Hope you've learned something, a bit more about fieldmargin you didn't know. I think I learned a few tricks about notes going over them. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And yeah, hopefully see you on the next one. Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.